Welcome to the Dallas Division October webinar. Would like to thank our 2020 year-long partners, Facets Appliance Kitchen and Bath, Foxworth Galbraith Lumber Company, Prosperity Bank, Riddell Plumbing, and Stellar Home Theater and Beyond. I'd like to especially thank our meeting partner, Kristen King with a Samsung Appliance, and give her a couple of minutes to say a few words.
Hey guys, I am Kristen King with Samsung Builder Appliance, and we are very happy to be continuing sponsoring with some DBA events, both virtually and in person. If there are builders out there listening, we would absolutely love to quote your appliance brand, packages with Samsung, which is the #1 selling appliance brand and #1 with JD Power for consumer satisfaction. So if there's anything that we can help you with and we can quote you, please give me a call. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Kristen. Got one quick announcement. The Dallas BA Golf Tournament presented by Bravas DFW and Fox Energy Specialists is coming up on Monday, November the 2nd. It's got a tee time of 10 a.m. One golf course is already sold out, and the second one is filling up fast, so get registered. 288 golfers are expected to attend, and we've got partnerships for this event that are still available. For more information or to register, visit the calendar at dallasbuildersassociation.org or contact Misty Varsalone at the Dallas BA. All right, we're about to start our webinar, but first, just a reminder, we're going to be taking questions for this program. If you've got questions, please put them in the Q&A. You can find that feature at the bottom of your screen. Questions will be answered at the end of the program. Also, this webinar will be recorded and made available to the Dallas Builders Association YouTube channel and Facebook. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the Executive Officer of the Dallas Builders Association, Phil Crone.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you all out there virtually attending today. I see a few more floating in and quite a lot of builders, and that's not a surprise at all, just given the subject matter today and the ongoing challenges that we've seen getting permits and getting through various processes with the city in a timely manner. Really happy to have someone who has really spearheaded an awful lot of the initiatives that are giving me newfound optimism that we're going to be able to overcome these challenges and transcend this crisis that we find ourselves in. And that's Dallas City Councilman Chad West, who has really dove into this with both feet, and other council members have definitely been instrumental on this to try to, through the budget process and now into the implementation phase of several different initiatives, I think get us to the point where, we're going to be able to start seeing those timelines reduced, and hopefully here in the near future, the city operating efficiently, effectively, and predictably. So council member, I'm really happy to have you today, and perhaps maybe just a little bit about your background, because this is a big issue to take on as first-time councilman. I know your experience with the city runs a lot deeper than that, but just maybe tell us a little bit about your background, and then also your experience with sustainable development and construction, why you've taken this issue on like you have.
Sure, and thank you, Phil, and to your group for inviting me to talk with you all today. I'll tell you that on no other issue besides public safety have I had as many people reach out to me with concerns and constructive suggestions on what needs to be fixed on any item in the city. But this is a real problem across the city, and I think it's reflected in the fact that pretty much every single item we pushed forward in this year's budget was unanimous when it came to votes from council to support some changes, because all the council members are frustrated because we're hearing from y'all. We're hearing from our constituents and our builders, and we're just like, we want it fixed too, because we're tired of the inefficiencies in the system. So just my background before I ran for council is I was the planning commissioner for District 1. Scott Griggs had appointed me to that position. So I have a little bit of experience on the zoning side of the house, and had worked with sustainable development from that end. I don't develop homes, but I am in the tunnel car wash business. And so I've been through sustainable development myself, as a tunnel car wash owner operator. And I'll tell you my own personal story. I have two stories with sustainable development, and I'll make them quick because they're anecdotal and y'all have the same stories as I do. One of them is the more recent one, and it's on my car wash. We have our original location is in Ennis, Texas. It was a breeze to get that built. It was just amazing. It was, they like handed us the keys to the city. They're like, whatever you need, we want your business here. Cedar Hill is where our second location's at, and we filed our construction permit application in Cedar Hill and in Dallas at the Sustainable Development within 1 week of each other, because our third location is set to be in Oak Cliff. And as you can probably hear by my words, one's open, one's not. So within 1 week of each other, the two were filed, and we have been open in Cedar Hill. Oh, and I had to get an SUP to actually build the car wash in Cedar Hill. I didn't have to do that in Dallas. So we went through the entire construction process, got the SUP, and have been open in Cedar Hill for our car wash location since February. We're still not open in Dallas. We're projected to open, fingers crossed, next month. So it is a 10, 11 month delay, and we didn't even have to get an SUP. God help me if I had to do that in the city of Dallas. My other experience was before I was, and they also knew who I was too, by the way. So that this is me going through this. I can't imagine,
Wow.
I didn't like ask for favors or anything, but my name was on everything. And so I can't imagine if I hadn't been a sitting council member, what that would have looked like. But my other story was before I ever ran for council, before I was on the plan commission, nobody at Sustainable Development knew who I was. And I made the disastrous attempt to GC myself with no experience, a conversion from a residential property to change the use over to a restaurant use, because it's near Bishop Arts, and Bishop Arts, it's like a really hot area. That's what I represent. And so I tried to go through a renovation and also a change of use. It was a disaster, a lot of it my fault. But as a little guy who's just doing like a one-off project, you talk about the most unfriendly, awful customer service experience ever, where you call up and you get a different person every time you call and nobody knows what's going on in your application. And the default answer is usually no to anything you're asking. Unless it's like, is my case moving forward? Then, the answer's still no to that though. So, that's been my own personal experience. It's gotten worse, as I know Phil knows, and all of y'all do with COVID. Part of it is, of course, because of the electronic plan submission got escalated in terms of ramping up so quickly. So there are some things that I don't want to just blame on staff for that, but the execution of it was pretty poor. So that's sort of my background, Phil, and I'm starting to go off down on a tangent here, and I'll let you reel me back in and get to your questions.
Well, it's a tangent that I hear day in and day out from so many of our builder members. And, by the way, you guys, because I know you're not shy on this subject, throw in the Q&A in the chat, anything that you've got on your mind. And I've got a few questions lined up, but we'll certainly get to yours as we go here. But you're exactly right. I mean, these challenges predated the pandemic. We knew that there needed to be an online system because we were seeing at the Oak Cliff Municipal Center people lining up at 3 a.m. just trying to get their place in line. That was kind of indicative of the challenges, but also an advantage that Dallas had, whereby you could still drop off your plans and get your permit in a day. And that was a real advantage that the city had that certainly isn't one now. So just a little bit about, the pandemic came on, we had to make some changes like other cities have. One of the questions, and this was evident to me in the hearing, transportation infrastructure hearing a week or so ago, it seemed like there was a lot of just not really blame cast, but the staff was identifying deficiencies in applications as a real reason why this issue was a challenge. And our thought is that, builders didn't just suddenly forget how to apply for a building permit once COVID hit. So if you can talk a little bit about just some of the post-COVID items, your response, you're really good about keeping us in the loop on how things were changing, especially back in March and April when they were changing quickly. But, just some of your observations on the pandemic hit and how things went from bad to worse with Dallas permitting. And then after that, we'll get into maybe what we're doing about it now.
Right. Well, I had heard from folks in the industry, probably some of the people on this call actually, and I think and from you as well, Phil, that it hasn't always been this way. 7, 8 years ago, maybe around that time frame before I got into development, it was much more efficient. And for whatever reason, there's been a shift in mindset and certainly in efficiencies in OCMOC, and I'll just use the lingo. And then, of course, we've all seen that it's gotten worse during COVID. Something you just said, Phil, really resonates with me because I've been talking about it with Councilman Blewett and Blackman quite a bit, is that the sort of excuses that come out anytime we have a discussion, a public hearing about the problems, and there seems to just be this staff mentality like, we're going to blame it all on the builders. And there's probably some blame there too, right? But at the end of the day, we are a customer service organization. And if somebody can't figure out how to submit their permit correctly, we should be calling them and we should be trying to help them and walk them through that and not just kick it to the back of the line. I mean, that is so incredibly frustrating. And it several of us blew our minds that that's the mentality of the sort of the head of management over everything. Like, okay, we're just going to kick you back. And that trickles down to the entry-level employee whose attitude then becomes like, it's easier just to say no, kick you back for a deficiency and make you get back at the end of the line. So that, unfortunately, is still the attitude today, but we made it, I feel like very clear at one of our more recent public hearings that attitude is not acceptable, and you've got to completely change that mindset. And I'll tell you, like, I've never seen council in any real issue, maybe short of our speed racing ordinance, where everybody is just united together on fix it at whatever the cost. And it's really no excuse when you look at it and you've got an enterprise fund to back you up. If you need to charge more, charge a little bit more. Do what you need to do to make it more of an efficient process. And hopefully we put some things in place in the budget that's going to help get that moving. I see it as a kind of a long-term, a medium-term, and a short-term solutions. I don't think it's going to fix it overnight, even the short-term stuff. But if we can make it just a little bit better, then we've been successful.
Well, let's talk a little bit about those specific budget measures, the efficiency study, the options to have a little bit more opportunity for, the one and done third party engineer and architect review type of items. Tell them, for those that are on this webinar that may not be familiar with the specifics of what was in the budget, talk a little bit about your priorities and what practically they should be able to do, especially in the medium to long term.
So I'll start long and then I'll work to immediate. It just kind of makes sense that way, because that's kind of how it came out in the budget. Is long term, we've set aside $1 million out of building inspection fees. There's like $54 million in there, by the way, to pay for an efficiency study like a KPMG group would provide to tell us what needs to be done to fix the building, fix the attitude, fix the processes in there. And we're going to send them a few specific questions in there. What departments within sustainable development can be privatized, and what do you recommend, what of those that can be, what do you recommend we actually look at privatizing? And there's a fairly large group of us up here who would support some level of privatization, all the way from a few departments to, like you listen to Kleiman, he just privatized the whole city. So it depends who you talk to. But I do believe that private industry can do things a lot more efficiently than public. I worry about some things where we've got state statutes to comply by, like the plating office. I worry about giving that up completely to private industry, but I think we can work through that with our consultant. So the efficiency study is going to come out. We got to put an RFP out for who we're going to hire, and then we'll get that going. But I see that as our long-term fix. The other long-term fix is, I assume everyone on this call has been into Ocmok, the building itself, at some point. That is in my district, by the way. It is if you talk to a few of my friends on the Plan Commission, they call it the building of misery. And part of that's because it's where dreams go to die, according to my friend. I'm not adopting that.
It is a former bomb shelter, by the way. Yeah.
It looks like one too. But part of it is because the building is just such an awful place to work, just because of the physical limitations of it, and the walls, they leak. It's dark. It's if you're a young engineer or an architect just getting started working for the city, what a demoralizing place to be, right? And if you're a contractor coming for your first experience with the city of Dallas, and you walk in there, it's just not a good image, for the city. So we're looking at, as another part of the long-term solution, moving them somewhere else to a better facility that's just a more pleasant place to be, and a more conducive working environment. It's more collaborative instead of in the individual silos. That may be part of the efficiency study. It may not. I'm not sure. The midterm, I would say, would be the self-certification, which Phil and your group is very instrumental in helping get that teed up. We have directed TC, the city manager, for within the next quarter to come up with a plan to, some of y'all may remember this because I understood this used to be in existence in the city, where architects and engineers could self-certify their documents when they file them with the city, their permitting documents. We're asking for this program to be set up for all types of permits except for new construction, because we are worried about new construction involving zoning situations. So we got to figure out another solution to that, and there isn't one right now. And I would ask your group to maybe help us with that. But all other permitting, if we can sort of get them self-certified, get that out of like the mess that's sitting there bottling up the permitting chunk, we can then open up the pipeline and clear that out, and then the focus of staff could be on the new construction work. And so what would happen is, once it's self-certified, it would then go to staff. It'd skip that initial review, go to staff for the site plan review, which would then take it on to hopefully a faster way of getting approved. I think it's a brilliant idea, and thanks to Phil and a couple other builders who helped us with it, because your architects, your engineers, they're already insured and bonded, and there's a level of security there if they're going to put their stamp on something, that we shouldn't have to double, triple check with staff by some entry-level person who probably has not even the level of education that the folks who are stamping the documents have. So that's a midterm solution we're looking at. That is already, it's not funded specifically, but it can be, because we can access the enterprise funds later. One of the other problems we face at Ocmok is that we just don't pay enough as a city. And we did build in money from the enterprise funds to give recruitment and retention bonuses to our engineers, who we apparently can only keep like 9 or 10 months before they leave the city. We're hoping that will help keep them. The reason why we didn't do a salary raise is because of civil service rules at the city. That's like our version of a union. Mm-hmm. If we raise those engineers' salaries, we got to raise all engineers across the city, which would impact general funds, and it gets complicated then. So we got creative, and we just did this recruitment retention bonus, which would then just affect sustainable development. So hopefully that will help us get them in. A couple other problems that we've experienced has been not having the server bandwidth to be able to handle the amount of applications. Staff has given me the indication that that should be fixed within the within the next month or so. So that shouldn't be an ongoing issue that we have to deal with. And I think that's really it right now. The surge team they're pushing back on, Phil and a couple others had recommended a surge team, which would rapidly process permits when permits are just sitting there like they are now. And we have like a third-party person to review that. Staff is pushing back on that right now, so we're still in discussions on if we're going to get heavy-handed on this or not with staff. So that's really it, Phil, that we're doing. But I think those are some pretty big items, and it's. I think staff was a little surprised we got that aggressive on it, but it needed to happen, and council was behind it because, frankly, they're just tired. They're tired of the. We're tired of the excuses. You know.
Yeah, I agree. And a few points that resonated with me, and I think will resonate with this group that you made in the last answer, is that I think everybody's a product of where they work. And if you're not in a comfortable place or anything that's, befitting of the education or the professionalism that you want to instill, then it makes it very difficult to be at your best. So I think there's something to be said about Ocmok in the future. And I know that's been simmering for a little while, and hopefully will start moving forward in a better direction there. And just on the same vein, that office and everybody who's there, that's our city's front porch to economic development. And that's the gateway for so much revenue in the city, but also so many projects, large and small, that are important both for the applicants, the homeowners, and our city. I understand that platting kind of is what it is, and we're not going to give up the oversight of the city attorney and some of the things that they really need to do and keep an eye on. But I think for new construction, there are some items such as, for example, you have a geotechnical engineer licensed by the state who's reviewing designing and reviewing foundation designs. Our building code already speaks to it. So that's, one item within new construction that could involve and should involve a lot more third-party help. There are also a whole lot of landscape architects, arborists, and people that have expertise in tree ordinances around the state. But we keep having, a big challenge here where it seems like the arborist office in Dallas and through Phil Irwin, that also becomes a bit of a hang up because they have to review with a very detailed ordinance. They go through it with a fine-tooth comb a lot of times when projects are in the option period, and that option tolls, or they just don't have the certainty needed to get the financing on what that final dollar is going to be. So, I don't know if you had any comments on those, but those are, I think, among the specifics and sort of related to the next question I had on what can the industry, me, and people on this webinar do to help you implement those things efficiently and effectively.
What you've been doing has been very helpful so far, is just serving as a resource and providing advice. I think if we can hone down on the third-party reviewers like you just did, and get that, instead of just saying, hey, we want to have third-party review for everything, which is what I asked for the first time, maybe hone down a little bit. That might be something we can work with staff a little bit better on. There's what I want to avoid is where I'm so heavy-handed that staff just kind of shuts down and it becomes more antagonistic than it already is. We're already kind of given a lot of give and take on this and a pushback. And so I want this to be as collaborative as possible. And so if we can be very specific with staff, that would be helpful, because it's people are a little bit territorial. We know that. But that mentality is what got us to the position we're in today with Ocmok. So we've got to be, I think there's a balance is what I'm saying. Instead of coming in like a bull in a china shop, I prefer to come in and in a collaborative way. And that's what I think we're doing with a little bit of a heavier hand than we've done in the past. But yeah, I think, to your point, to answer your question specifically, like let's hone down on what you want to see third-party reviewers for, and then just tell your people to keep doing what they're doing in terms of emailing their council members that they know, and continue explaining what concerns you have, because then we will continue to pressure TC, Chris Weckert, Majid. Well, it's going to be Dr. Johnson today, starting today is the new, is where that's going. Under his purview. It goes away. If you know Majid was over sustainable development. Now it's under Dr. Johnson. And to your point, Phil, it's so important that we do this now, because we're going to be seeing a continued reduction in sales taxes that the city's collecting probably for the next year, depending on how COVID goes. And we are so desperately reliant on property taxes and the property taxes that come from new construction. So shame on us if we're preventing ourselves from collecting the taxes we need to get more cops, more streets fixed, stuff like that,
Yeah, I agree. And then not to mention just the market dynamics are starting to favor the suburbs and places further out, just with the remote work and some of these forces that we can't control, other than to the extent that we make the city of Dallas more competitive than it is right now, to keep that from happening. And this kind of addresses a few of the questions that just came in, and I'm going to try to maybe put a bow on these two that I got and summarize those in my own words here. Is, just a lot of this has to do, and I know it's a delicate balance, with the attitude and approach towards staff. And I certainly expect that there'll be some resistance when it comes to the third party review on a number of things. The ones I mentioned, or fire sprinklers was another idea, because those, could be perceived as a threat, in terms of the workflow that goes through. But I think the big question, the challenge though, and a lot of frustration that our members have, is just with the aforementioned attitude that they get. I always say that it's what we need to do to fix this is align the people, the processes, and the policy, and the people are a big part of this. Because council members don't want to be permit expediters. We need staff, you need staff to be able to answer the bell and get things moving. But when do you see and how do you see the necessary changes in attitude be able to filter down from people like Chris, who I feel really want to make a difference and do this, down to the plans examiners and everybody there in that building?
I agree. I feel like Chris is definitely got his heart in the right place and his head in the right place, but it's what's got to happen is you've got to have some kind of a shift, and maybe that's in how people are evaluated for their job performance, from whatever it is now to how many applications do you get through. So if are you rated on, how many applications are right now? Is it how many that you process totally over the year? And does process also include how many you kick back? I don't know what that evaluation is, but we talked about this last time at our public hearing, the last one we discussed on this, which I think was the last budget discussion. And it's, how do we shift the employee's mentality? And I think the only way you can do that is with the carrot, as opposed to the stick in this case. And the carrot being a change in how they're evaluated for job performance. And so with the performance measures turning to be how many applications successfully get through, because we want them to pick up the phone and call you if, Phil, you've got an application coming through and you're missing a signature. Well, instead of kicking you to the back of the line, we want them to call you and say, hey, can you sign this real quick and get this right back to me, and we can get you moving along. That is exactly what should happen. And I'm gonna, if it's me and my car wash construction is going to get pushed back, a month because I'm missing a document from my architect, I'm going to drop everything I'm doing to get that document. I will drive to my architect's office in Grapevine, get it if he's not answering his phone, and take it down to Jefferson myself. And so you call me and I'll get you what you need. And we want to get staff to feel like they're empowered and incentivized to do that. And to put it back on us to get that information.
Is it fair to say that this is a no holds bar line in the sand expectation from council that there is a immediate improvement on attitude from the top down in terms of the customer friendly approach. I know the way that we do things and how we carry things out, we're going to have some back and forth on that, but this attitude issue seems to be just such a prevalent one, and all the different examples that I'm seeing in the Q&A and hearing from everybody.
I'd say yes, and to go a step further, attitude and efficiencies. I think we want to see improvement to both. And if this was a new thing caused just by COVID, we might have a little bit more patience with that. But this has been, as you know, I think the first time I ever met you, Phil, we talked about this. This has been going on for years, and there's really no excuse for it after this long of a period of time. And it's not even a general fund issue. If the issue was funding, that's a whole nother problem, and that's partly our fault, right? But it's not, because it's enterprise funded, so it's self-funded through permitting fees. So if it's just a simple matter of the management's not figuring out what the problem is, and so yeah, we're at the end of our rope, and unanimously, all 15 of us have voted for all these initiatives with Ocmok.
And I know, talking to Councilman Blewett, just his experience on the mortgage side, as he told me, he's said, I know how paperwork moves, and paperwork's not moving the way it should at Ocmok right now. And that's still the case. I mean, I know Chris wants to see things improving. They're putting people on the issue, but, just some things where, just to try to answer a number of the questions I'm getting here, somebody's waiting on, Tom London's waiting on a permit now on 60 days. Somebody else is saying, I'm 26th in line and I submitted 7 weeks ago, which means that, maybe at best I'm going to be 3 or 4 days away. So it's still happening. We're still having the same issues that we've been talking about before, hoping to see that improvement. But I think a big part of it, and this is another question that we got here, is this is just my opinion, and you don't have to comment on this if you don't want to or not. But I think we've got Chris, but we also need, I believe, somebody from the outside with a track record in another city and the building official position, moving things through effectively and really in a model that we want Dallas to become, because there are unique challenges with the city that I think being immersed in it for as long as some staff members have, they can't see the outside and they can't see the different reality. And I really think that sort of deputy, whoever he or she would be very effective to work in concert with Chris on getting in there, knowing how building codes work, and making sure that things are moving the way they need to. It seems to be
very useful to have somebody who's been in the trenches. I always felt like in college and law school, I don't want to say identified, but I paid a little more attention to people who had been practicing in the real world and what they were teaching versus just in academics their whole life. So I feel like in this particular situation too, we could definitely benefit by having folks in some of our positions in the Ocmok who have had that. And I don't, that's not a level I can get involved in, so
sure.
But we can certainly pass that information along to TC, and that's a great suggestion, frankly.
I think that's really what's needed. I mean, because Chris did a great job organizationally, code compliance, and some of the knowledge there just takes decades to acquire when it comes to a building inspections office. And I think, that's probably the one missing dynamic to carry things out here. Another brief comment, I know in your district, we deal with across the city, certainly a lot of conservation districts. And the biggest thing for us is those, especially, they add to the delay because they lack certainty. We see the nuts and bolts of how it's written, and we want to follow that and know what the rules are. But sometimes the interpretations get a little bit outside the four corners of those. Is that something that you're seeing, or how would you answer the, the question about some of the challenges that builders are having, especially in conservation districts, moving things in a timely manner because they keep getting new requirements that aren't in the documents.
Does this involve like the certificate of appropriateness when they're applying for those, or when is it just in general it's a lack of consistent application of standards, or I guess I need to get a little more specific here.
It's really it's a lot of subjective interpretation of the city code, especially with the conservation district requirements. I just had somebody talk to me that all they were trying to do was increase a fence from 6 feet to 8 feet, and that fence wouldn't have to be permitted with the 6 foot in height, but it did have to, and then first go through conservation district review for the 8 foot height, and it took him upwards of a month or more, maybe even longer, just because it was, yeah, you need to do this, but then you have these 4 other things that aren't written out in the process with the city that were all these gotchas that were there. And that's just a big challenge. I don't know if there's a straight answer to that other than just to flag it that it's a big concern.
I'm gonna have to, we'll have to talk about that later, because that's one I haven't dug into yet. I know we have an Office of Historical Preservation now, and I just watched their briefing this morning on what needs to change in the code. I was looking for my notes here, and they handle conservation district issues. We have less historical conservation protected homes in Dallas than Fort Worth does, if you can believe it. But the typical docket for a landmark commission review in Dallas is about 440 pages versus Fort Worth is only 87 pages. Mm-hmm. So it's having less properties, but our docket is 3 times as much in terms of paperwork and complication. So I think there's the lesson there, just from the high level, is that and I'm glad that Murray Miller, the new director of OHP, sees this. We've got to simplify I think he actually said streamline our processes and simplify the code, which was a refreshing thing to hear from an administrator, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if my screen,
that one. Oh, my favorite
my
document.
screen share, since you mentioned it, and I don't know if this makes our residential folks feel any better, but this is the process that we asked them to outline for new commercial construction and additions that starts with the start and ends with your final CO. I don't even know where to start with this.
I keep waiting for someone to actually make this into like a nightmare version of Chutes and Ladders. You're over here on the right and you forgot a signature. You're going back to the start.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's why I've kind of characterized it in an article as the old Oregon Trail game that some of us.
Yeah, that's where you did do that. That was
a certain generation, I suppose, remember. Hey,
can you put that back up for a minute? There's an interesting illustration, because I have over on my board here, I've got both the residential and commercial put up there so I don't forget this, just so you guys know I'm always thinking about you. I don't know if you can see, there's the commercial one right there. That's residential.
The big board.
Yeah, you guys have made it on the big board. That's just every day I walk into City Hall, I look at that and I'm like, yeah, it's still there.
Can you see that?
Yeah, and we don't need to dive into like what's on each square. That would be really painful.
Sure.
But you could see at the bottom left is the divisions by color, and those are the different divisions within that a different application's got to go through. You've got the city attorneys. You could probably see that one on the screen. It's the darker blue. The fire department's in red. Green is Parks and Rec. Sustainable development, I think, is in yellow, if I remember correctly. And so these are the different departments applications flow through. What's interesting is about, when you talk about streamlining, Chris has done a good job at sustainable development of getting all of their people onto the same like online, they're getting their online submission, and then the applications go through the whole process online. Mm-hmm. But what happens is all the city departments in Dallas are not on this same system, this document system. So I'm not sure which departments are not on, but let's say city attorneys is off of it. And so your application would then have to be printed off, put into someone's desk or into a spreadsheet version once it hits the city attorney's office. And then their notes would have to be uploaded later onto this online, system. So instead of just one system, like if you think of a DocuSign process, right? It can go from one person to the other, like in real estate, which I think is what we should be having. We don't have that built in here. I think that's the original intent for us to get there. But right now, it might get to 3/4 of the way through the zoning process or the development process, and it's got to be printed off or literally put on a different kind of spreadsheet to go through certain departments. It's very inefficient the way it's set up. And that's not just commercial, that's also residential. So the staff's working on it. They're just not there yet.
Yeah, I think that's it's good to document those processes, as painful as the chutes and ladders may be there. And then that gives us a working place to try to add some efficiency in there. But I know, and several of you builders out there have asked questions that are, I think, deeper in the weeds than what Councilmember West or any city council member would understand, but they would appreciate, and he does, the fact that a big portion of this is that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, and we're lodged in these silos that while certain people on staff understand, or another thing, when Akmak was full of people, you would see the same many cases former city employees down there with this whole industry that was just created around these inefficiencies that would just run through the permits and get things done. And our goal is to let this be something that any home builder with any sort of experience, and just as importantly, any citizen out there who wants to access the city and apply for these permits can do it on their own without having somebody do it for them or having to pay a specialist. I heard from somebody, I believe one of your constituents, Councilman, who was having the same issue. She was a former city employee, but she was also encountering some of the same issues herself.
Yeah, it affects all of us, and it's, at the end of the day, it just hurts the city because we're not getting the tax revenue we need, and we're pushing people to go to other cities. I mean, as I'm talking to my investors in the car wash, it's much more appealing to look at Midlothian for our next site versus somewhere else in Dallas. Same land cost really with the two sites we're looking at, but they're opening the doors and saying, we want you here. And, versus what I'm dealing with in Dallas right now on my final site. So.
Well, I know we hear that time and time again, and Alan Hoffman was a fence example I gave you, and he said that there were 177 emails exchanged, a few of them with him, just to try to make a fence go from 6 to 8 feet.
I think I got Alan's email. I feel like he and I probably had a couple emails too. I don't know. I had quite a few from DBA and some other groups. So
yeah, Alan's sort of our canary in the coal mine. He seems to find the trouble first, and when he's struggling, we kind of know that there's a challenge coming. But I think we've covered a lot of these important items really well. I wanted to ask you though about, you had mentioned the other one that's a big challenge for our city, and that's just with public safety, both in terms of having adequate resources and also ensuring that they're deployed in an equitable manner. I think that's going to be a big balance. We've dealt with it in the budget, so I wanted to get your comments on the way forward on public safety, making sure that both of those aspects are addressed, and then also, what are you looking for in our next police chief? What attributes would you like he or she to have?
Yeah, well, I mean, first I want to say that there was a lot of media hype out there generated by certain folks who are talking about the defunding. DPD got 15 million more this year because it's now officially the next fiscal year than they did last year. So DPD is funded. They are one of the only departments in the city that got more money than last year because it's frankly, we took a hit. Even with the CARE Act money, we still lost a lot in sales tax revenue. So DPD was funded. Probably would have liked to get more, just like everybody else. But what we learned in the budget process, the majority of us who did vote for the budget, is that the issues within public safety really are caused by staffing efficiencies, and that there just needed to be a shifting of staff. We don't necessarily need to hire more uniform cops, but what we do need to do was get some of these cops out of desk jobs and onto patrol. And that's exactly what this budget's intended to do. It's not going to be an overnight process, but it should happen fairly quickly. We hope, a lot of us, I think the entire city hopes, that the protests will wind down, or if they continue, they stay peaceful. And that will certainly help in easing the public safety situation. And frankly, research is kind of telling us that if once COVID finally lifts, or kind of goes away, it will, a lot of the crime issues that we're having for people just being bored and sort of idle right now should taper down a bit. Blewett, you mentioned Blewett. He was on a ride along a couple months ago downtown, and they pulled over some guy who was in his 20s, just flying through downtown, one of the speed racers. He had a bunch of guns in the back of his car, and the dude had driven in from Mesquite, and Blewett just asked him, he's like, why are you doing this? And he's like, well, I'm just bored. So I think there is a certain amount of people who are just sitting around bored with not a lot to do because they can't go out to different places. Of course, it's lifted a little bit, but it's from when this happened. But there is just this element of people sitting around with a lot of time on their hands. And I think once COVID calms down a little bit more, we'll see some of that go down. Now, speed racing is going to continue to be a problem, and I'm not going to deep dive on that today, but it's speed racing is like our biggest challenge, at least in my district right now. Police chief, I like Chief Hall. I think Chief Hall there's a lot of things about her and her performance I appreciate. What I would like to see in the next chief is someone who is a really great communicator with both the public and with staff. I think that's a challenge the city has experienced in a lot of different departments, including at the very top of the city, and us included, that there's been not the best communication on certain things. And if communication had been better, we could have avoided some of the problems we've had. So communication at the top, and then the chief has done, again, she's done a good job of getting the KPMG study rolled out. We're just not there yet, but I would definitely want someone who comes on who is committed to following. That was an expensive study, and if we're going to pay for that, we need to at least try it out. So that person needs to really push the staffing levels to what was intended in that study, because it compared best practices across the country and crime levels, and I think it's worth looking at for sure.
Yeah, I agree, and kind of coming full circle as we're poised to do a similar look at sustainable development and construction, we're really going to need to make sure that we have people there to carry out that vision and to help make those findings as accurate of a depiction of the challenges ahead of us as possible here. I put a last call out there for questions from builders, of course, with the proviso in there that you guys were asking some pretty deep diving stuff here. So kind of keep it a little bit higher level. But council member, I really, really do appreciate your time and effort in taking charge of this issue, because we couldn't do it without you and your colleagues, quite frankly, because this, I don't want to micromanage. I don't want to get down there and tell everybody you've got to do this or that's going to happen, but we need to see some improvement, and the output is what it is, and it's not adequate right now, but I hope it will be in the near future.
I appreciate it. And I will say, DBA has been one of the most, if not, is for sure the most on the residential side in terms of providing us with guidance and feedback. And please keep doing what y'all do. And I do want to end on a positive note. you know, despite some of the challenges we're having on the administration side, Dallas is still growing, and the region for sure, but even the city of Dallas is growing. A lot of, you know, these sort of crazy situations going on in Portland and on the West Coast in particular, but even in New York, we're hearing a lot of the larger corporations are looking at the Dallas area for relocations, as y'all probably are aware. So we're going to continue to see growth here with a favorable economy and good business practices and being a business-friendly community. And so that means more homes for y'all to build and more tax revenue for the city to collect. So hopefully we can get our processes to be just as efficient. And that's what we got to work on. It's so important.
One of the Philisms that people hear too much around this organization from me is that homes are where the jobs sleep at night. And I agree that we're going to be a magnet for job growth. And I hope that Dallas in particular is going to be home for a lot of those jobs when they're looking to have a roof over their head. And you've done so much, sir, to keep it going in that direction. And our membership's poised to take the next steps and look at what we need to do to get us there to where we need to be.
Yeah, keep sending your emails to council members, even if they're like, you know, just even small stuff, because the more they are annoyed with the process, the easier it makes it for us to get this fixed. So please do that.
Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate that, and appreciate your time. And I'll hand it back over to Richard Miller.
And I'm going to bounce for a 1 o'clock meeting. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thanks, Councilman. All right. Thanks so much, Phil, for moderating, and thanks, Misty, for hosting and organizing. Our next webinar is going to be on December 10th at noon. It's going to feature a market update from Texas A&M Real Estate Center's Chief Economist, Dr. Jim Gaines. You can register now at dallasbuilders.org/calendar. Thanks, everyone, for attending today, and have a great day.
Thank you all.